Welcome to the Mind Design Sports Podcast. I'm Brandon, and in each episode, I'll be talking about sports psychology with the guest speaker. If you want to design your sports experience, you've come to the right place. If you want more tips and insights on how to improve your sports performance mentally, check out our website and other podcasts at mind-designsports.org.
Today we are talking with George Steffey, a member of the US ski team who played soccer in high school and was valedictorian. He attended Dartmouth College and will be speaking with us today about his experience skiing and the mental side of it. I'm Emma, a blog writer at Mind Design Sports, and I know George. Thank you again for being here, George, to discuss with me and Brandon. So I guess our first question would be whether you could introduce yourself and cover anything that you'd like to say.
Yeah, my name's George Steffey. I'm a professional alpine ski racer. I'm 23 years old right now. Grew up skiing there in New Hampshire. Went to high school at Stratton Mountain School, Winter Sports Academy in Vermont. From there, graduated in 2015 as the valedictorian, and then was accepted to Dartmouth senior year there. And I made the national training group, sort of like a feeder program for the U.S. team, and skied well that year and the U.S. team from there. And I've been racing for the U.S. team for, this is my fourth or fifth year now. And taking classes where I can at Dartmouth where I can fit them in. And I've worked my way up to the B team now, and I race World Cup circuit and the Continental Cup circuits. Right now, the only one of those that's happening is the European Cup. The North American Cup's not happening this year.
Yeah, sounds good. And online it said that you were a valedictorian in high school, so you must have taken and focused on a lot of difficult classes. So how did you manage your time, and maybe if you could provide some tips for athletes that don't have a lot of time?
Yeah. With ski racing especially, it's all about time management. The way I look at it, you can kind of choose between three things in school. There's, obviously your academics, and then there's your athletics and your social life. You can kind of pick two or three. So I picked athletics and academics. Didn't really worry about, my social standing and partying and all that. So yeah, that's just what I directed my focus and time to, and where I put my effort into.
Could you maybe speak to us about how your mentality changed from high school to Division I college level?
Yeah, so I never actually raced for Dartmouth. I just raced for my high school and then for the U.S. team. But I would say it's definitely like a growing process, You race in high school and kind of race locally and nationally, not too much international racing, a little bit here and there. But I'd say the biggest thing was sort of understanding the depth of the competition on the international level and understanding how much harder you have to push it and send it in skiing to kind of keep moving up, because there's just so much depth at the European level. So you kind of, every tenth of a second is, cost more. There's more people stacked in there. So really, learning how to push myself harder to, match that intensity that comes with the international competition.
Yeah, of course. And back to the soccer, how did your mentality change from a team sport to an individual sport like skiing?
So obviously the team sport's a little different, I'd say it's definitely easier to kind of get in the right mentality, and it's easier to kind of build that mentality when you're in a group, because all it really takes is kind of one person with the right spirit, and it's easier to jump on and kind of go along with it and ride off of that, whereas, individually it's, 100% up to you. Manifests itself a lot more in an individual sport. So it's just that much more important. So I'd say, it's definitely something that I take a little more seriously in ski racing versus in soccer, because it plays such a bigger role in the outcome of your performance. In a team sport like soccer, maybe you're not having a great day, maybe you miss a few passes, maybe even miss, PK shot or something like that. It doesn't have nearly the kind of effect on the outcome of the competition, whether you kind of bring your A game or not. Definitely take it a little more seriously and have a little more ownership over my mentality, for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But as a former soccer captain, were there any elements you needed to bring to your team to kind of establish a certain mentality and to try and lift them up after a bad game?
Yeah, sure. The mentality isn't all that much different sport to sport. You're kind of trying to get everybody into that cool, confident state where they're, they believe in themselves, and they, uplifted enough to give it 100%, but not, so hyped up that they, can't focus or can't keep it consistent throughout the game. Definitely, like, on the soccer field, trying to get people into that sort of the same mentality that you would for a ski race, more or less, which was an interesting experience in high school for me, because at a Winter Sports Academy, everybody on my team was either a ski racer, an alpine ski racer, a Nordic ski racer, or a snowboarder. So it's interesting to kind of get everybody together and see all those different mindsets at play together on the soccer field.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we're just gonna move to skiing questions now. So how did you first get into skiing competitively? And yeah, I mean, it's more of a rare sport, so that's why we're asking.
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I lived for a few years before I moved to New Hampshire, I lived for a few years in Virginia and then New York, and we would do family ski vacations to the Northeast and to the West, and absolutely loved it, skiing on those vacations. And when we moved to New Hampshire when I was 5 or 6 years old, I just asked my parents to sign me up for whatever program had the most skiing in it, and it was the racing program. Unfortunately, we were only about 10 minutes away from a little ski hill in New Hampshire, so that's where I got involved, got started there at the Dartmouth Skiway. And yeah, my passion for it kind of grew from there. I fell in love with the sport and spent as much time as I possibly could skiing and training. And we grew up on a farm in New Hampshire, and we actually had a field in our backyard that was on a pitch. And my twin sister also ski raced, and it sort of became a family obsession. And we would actually take a snowmobile out and pack down the snow in this field and set a course and train with a snowmobile. Dad would tow us up and we'd ski down, do lap after lap when we didn't have training with our race program at the local mountain. So that's sort of how it started. And then, my love for ski racing definitely grew from there as I got more and more into it, more competitive throughout high school, and then obviously afterwards too.
So could you tell us a little bit about how your mental state can impact your performance, and given on how it actually impacts skiing in general?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of sports, but especially ski racing, your mindset is, I'd say at least, half the game. Half the game is getting your skiing up to, a competitive level, and the other half is being able to perform on race day. And that other half is obviously all about your mindset. And, I've spent a fair bit of time studying sports psychology and reading books, listening to podcasts, and so forth. And I'd say that every athlete has a slightly different take on it. And I'd say in general, finding the mindset that works best for you in terms of performance on race day is something that definitely has to come from within you. It can't really be necessarily something that you can just, copy from another athlete or what you've heard or read somewhere else, but, something that really you've kind of learned from yourself and from, bits and pieces elsewhere that you can kind of put together into a mindset and an approach that works for you and kind of reflects who you are at the deepest level, really. So for me personally, like the mindset that I try and take to race day is really like an aggressive kind of attacking mindset, which kind of reflects who I am as a person, because I'm a pretty intense, aggressive person. It's definitely like an individual process in terms of finding what works for you, but it's hugely important, and it's a huge part of the game in ski racing.
So before a race, do you have a plan and procedure to help you get in your best focus state? Do you do breathing techniques or listen to a certain type of music?
Yeah. I mean, my general strategy is to kind of stay pretty relaxed until it's time to get going. There's no point in trying to hold a heightened state of arousal, longer than you need to. So sort of after inspection, I try to, start to kick into gear, and I use things like, breathing techniques to, calm my nerves or get myself a little more fired up depending on where I am at the moment. And then, I usually, visualize the skiing that I want, and then kind of lock in on something for me that kind of pisses me off and fires me up. whether it's, somebody that beat me that I don't think should have, or, coach that said something to me, that I didn't like, or, whatever it is that day, I sort of, lock in on something, get fired up, and kind of lock into that racing mindset that, I try to bring to every competition.
Just a follow-up question. You were talking about like finding the mindset that fits best for you. So how can a young athlete like kind of try and see which mindset and like what are the mindsets that you're referring to?
I'd sort of see it as like a kind of a spectrum from like more of like a relaxed kind of, not passive, but almost like kind of a flowy mindset versus like, a little more intense, a little more like kind of an attacking mindset, or sort of like the two ends of the spectrum. And it obviously varies. Not only does it vary person to person, but it also varies sport to sport, the kind of mindset that works best. And alpine ski racing in particular is a sport where you're throwing yourself downhill at pretty high speeds, and something that kind of takes a lot of courage and gumption, I guess, to kind of get yourself to do it. So for me, the more like kind of playful mindset isn't quite as effective as like a kind of more aggressive, angry, attacking mindset. And yeah, I'd say for people trying to figure out what sort of mindset works best, look at, talk to people in the sport, listen to podcasts, read books on different athletes, in your sport, or other sports too. It's helpful to get a bigger picture of it as well. See what's out there and really understand like the different mindsets, different professional athletes are bringing, to competition. And then I guess kind of, understand your personality enough to kind of see where you can fit into one of those. Maybe you're a more kind of happy-go-lucky person and you're going to fall into more of a playful mindset, and that's what's going to work best for you. Or maybe you're more of a competitive, aggressive person and you're going to fall into that other end of the spectrum. I guess it's just kind of understanding where you personally fit into that sort of spectrum.
Yeah, and so obviously injuries are extremely disheartening for any athlete. So can you tell us how you recuperated from your knee injury and how your mindset might have played a role during your recovery process?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I blew out my knee in 2018 and missed the 2018-19 season. Did my PCL and MCL. Was off snow for about 10 months or so. And yeah, obviously getting injured is one of the toughest things athletes can face in their careers, but it was really about, instead of looking at it with kind of a victim mentality of like, oh no, why does this have to happen to me? This is going to set me back, into more of a, I guess, optimistic kind of mindset in seeing how you could actually use it to your advantage. And so for me, it was kind of being able to take a step away from the sport and kind of understand, my weaknesses, my flaws, what I needed to work on, and how I could get there. And really, honestly, it was understanding how big a role like the mental game really plays in ski racing. I thought was pretty big for me, and seeing that from a distance kind of gave me confidence in my comeback, because I was like, all right, even if I get back to, 90% of where I was before in terms of speed, if I'm better mentally, which I think I can use this time off snow to become, then I can more than compensate for what I'm lacking in speed through mental performance and your mental strength. So that definitely gave me confidence, and I started to look at it more as an opportunity instead of a setback. And that was hugely beneficial for me, in returning to snow and returning to competition as well.
How has your ski training been impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been impacted quite a bit. Our season last year was canceled pretty abruptly. We were actually we were in Europe, getting ready to drive to another race series, and at 4 a.m. or so, our coaches woke us up and basically told us that the rest of the season was canceled, or at least the upcoming events were, and that we had to get back to the U.S. because they were shutting down the borders soon. And so we just packed up and left that morning. So yeah, our last season was shut down early, and then we weren't able to do any on snow camps until about June. And then through the summer, we were only able to do domestic on snow camps. So we were at Mount Hood in Oregon and Copper Mountain in Colorado, and we were a little limited there in volume and different kinds of terrain and slopes that we usually get through our international camps. We usually go to New Zealand and sometimes do a camp in Europe in the glaciers there, sometimes South America. So we were definitely a little bit compromised there, but we got to spend more time in the gym. Kind of did what we could there, and then this season has changed quite a bit logistically. It's just been a little bit trickier in terms of testing and all that. We, managing the bubbles of each racing and training pod within our team has, been a little bit tricky because you're not trying to overlap bubbles, but, you also have people that, are going to work in with two different groups. So, it's been difficult. It's been a challenge, but, I'd say we've been making the most of it and we've actually been doing pretty well, all things considered. We were able to get a pretty good prep period in, and, so far races have kind of gone off with pretty minimal cancellations. So, that's pretty, fortunate in the grand scheme of things.
So obviously this pandemic is really abnormal. It's more of a once in a lifetime kind of thing for anyone. But do you have any advice for athletes on what they can do during the pandemic to keep progressing and also in general?
Yeah, I mean, get creative, and instead of using this pandemic as an excuse for why you can't, the kind of training you want, figure out what you can do and do it to the absolute best of your ability. Like, for example, this spring, all the gyms were closed, right? And our training facility was closed. And what I did actually, instead of letting my dryland training, become compromised, I borrowed a whole bunch of equipment from our training facility in Park City, Utah, a bunch of weights and barbell and all sorts of stuff, and rented a storage unit in the area and moved all that equipment in there and basically made like a little home gym out of it in a storage unit, which I worked out of all spring. And, there's other options like, figure out what your weaknesses are and figure out how you can address them given the compromised circumstances. So, maybe spend more time analyzing video, maybe, spend more time, maybe if you're a soccer player, spend more time doing drills, working on the fundamentals and, some of your footwork and so forth. So, just figure out what you can do, and instead of making excuses, take advantage of, the time to work on some of your weaknesses.
So I guess we were also kind of wondering how the pressure, obviously you're a skier who performs at a very high level, and so we were kind of wondering how you deal with that pressure and how it might differ from other pressure in other aspects of your life.
To a certain extent, it's kind of the first time you find yourself in a position that you haven't been in, like, maybe you're leaving after the first run and, going into the second round, or maybe it's your first time qualifying for the second round or something like that. Those moments are obviously, going to be nerve wracking, but the more you go through those kinds of experiences, the easier it gets, the more confidence you gain yourself that you can do what you're trying to do. And I'd say one of the biggest pieces is just, directing your attention and your focus. So whether you focus on, outside factors or variables you can't control, like, maybe how fast somebody else skied or something that hasn't even happened yet, like, how you're going to ski the second round. Instead of focusing on things like that, just focusing on, what you can control and what's going to help you ski well. So whether it's your technical or tactical cues or, maybe something that just gets you fired up and in the right mentality to race, practicing and, becoming more skilled at maintaining that focus of attention in, high stress situations.
Absolutely. Moving towards like the more sports psychology side, what is the mentality that you try to maintain throughout the season? Maybe it's like a sports psychology concept that's really helped you persevere, or a motto that you live by.
I'd say like something that I try to live by is basically just, putting my absolute best effort forth every single day. So in ski racing, it's, preparing to the fullest for your next session, going out there and, having a plan and doing your absolute best to execute it, and then reflecting, learning, and moving on. Throughout the season, I like to try and keep a confident but not too serious mindset. Ski racing is a pretty long season, and so it's easy. it always has its ups and downs, no matter how good you are. And so it's easy to kind of get caught in either of those peaks or troughs, and kind of just keeping relatively steady, keeping your confidence and not taking anything, too seriously, including yourself. I'd say is sort of what I go for throughout the season. Not lose sight of the bigger picture, and not lose sight of actually enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, that's completely right. And I think we were also kind of wondering, you've spoken to us about how you prepare for the race and how you feel before it actually begins, but are you actually thinking of anything whilst you're racing or at the end of it?
Yeah, I mean, in the course, I usually have either some cues that I'm running through my head, or maybe it's a feeling in my head that I'm trying to go for. It sort of depends on the situation, the day. But yeah, I usually have something short and simple that I have in my head that I'm trying to do or execute. That's definitely running through my head while I'm skiing, and then I come through the finish and usually kind of immediately kind of go in a state of reflection and just kind of think about it for a second. Did I do what I was trying to do? What could I have done better? What did I do well? What were the mistakes? What worked? What didn't? And then once I sort of sort through that, I usually make a plan for how I can do better next run.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you respond to difficult training sessions? Maybe after a race you didn't do that well. Maybe do you do positive self-talk, for example, or any other methods?
I mean, I try and take the approach that really the only setback in ski racing is getting injured. And even then, sometimes that's not necessarily a setback. Sometimes you can use that to your advantage. But I just try and look at everything not as a setback, but, if the outcome doesn't go the way I want, instead of seeing it as, something that's, putting me backwards, I try and extract any kind of positive out of it, or even something that I've learned out of it, and, use that moving forward to my benefit. And so in that sense, you're kind of, even if something doesn't go exactly the way you want it to, and it's not the outcome you're looking for, it sort of becomes, almost like it's all part of the plan, like it's all, just steps along the way, continuing to move you forward, no matter what the outcome is. So yeah, I'd say that's sort of the approach I try to take.
Just so that athletes can connect with you, would you mind sharing an instance where you faced something tough, maybe you fell in a race, or really anything?
Yeah, I'd say a good example last season, or I'll even do something more relevant this season. I had a pretty tough start to the season, skied pretty darn poorly through December, and I couldn't really figure out why. And it ultimately, a big piece of it wound up being I was on a different boot that wound up being a little bit stiffer. That was affecting my skiing, so I switched back the boot I was in earlier, and after a whole bunch of pretty piss poor races, I was able to come back in January and have a good set of races in slalom at some European Cups. It's the same approach that I was talking about earlier. I kind of said to myself, I know I can do it. I know I can ski fast, and I know I've done it before. And I started to bring out that good skiing again in training. And then going into the races, I kind of was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to go for my, the kind of skiing I've been putting forward in training. I'm going to give it some gas and see where that puts me. And it put me in a pretty darn good position for a couple of slalom races there. So that was sort of rebounding from really tough November, December into a stronger start to January.
And so kind of, how do you try and improve? Do you reflect on past races, or kind of focus on some of your goals you might try to achieve in the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's usually a very day-to-day, even run-to-run process for me. So, run to run, I really analyze, what was working, what wasn't, in terms of, cues and what I'm thinking about and what I'm trying, and how that manifests in my skiing. So maybe the cool thing about skiing is, you're going for this, there's 100 different ways to ski fast, and there's 100 different ways you can think about, getting a particular movement that might help you ski fast. So you can have all sorts of different cues for one kind of movement, like for example, flexing your boot more. You could have a cue like pulling your feet behind you, or pushing into the front of the boot, or a whole bunch of different variants off of that. And so you kind of just have to keep playing with cues and figure out what kind of outcomes they give you, and take those and hang on to the ones that work, and keep moving through the ones that don't work as well for you. And that's sort of the process that happens on a run-to-run basis. And then on a day-to-day basis, it's you kind of take a slightly broader look at it, analyze video, see maybe some things that you weren't quite feeling in training or racing, and you're able to do a little more comparison between different athletes, and then you can bring it back to the smaller level and figure out what sort of cues are going to help you get to the different body position or line you're trying to execute.
But you're still probably like pretty competitive, and a lot of people know you. How have you dealt with like the recognition, or maybe what would be your advice to like handle like everyone talking about you or your play style?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's all a matter of where you're directing your focus and attention. For me, I could care less about what people think about me with skiing and with other things too. So it comes naturally to me, ignoring that stuff. But yeah, it's just a matter of whether you choose to pay attention to any of that garbage, and whether you give it any kind of weight in your mind. And there's no reason to. All that really matters is kind of your take on the whole situation, and focusing on your mission.
Does the idea of like someone doubting you inspire you to work harder?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that is one of the things that fires me up the most, when someone doubts me, for sure. I actually love it when people do that. Gets me revved up. One example of that is last year, getting ready to start some races at Hinterstoder, my second World Cup series, and I was talking to the coach. I said, so, am I going to start this super combined race? And he told me, yeah, I'll reluctantly let you start because you haven't dominated on the circuit below the World Cup, which is the Noram Cup. And I was sort of sitting there saying to myself, are you freaking kidding me? You're telling me you're going to reluctantly let me start? Like, come on. Like, don't you have any faith in me? And that really fired me up. And then on that race, I definitely performed better than I thought I would. And a lot of other people did. And I was 30th on the Super G run of the combined, and skiing well in the slalom. I ultimately didn't finish in the slalom, but I was on track to have a really strong race there. I skied really well there, despite not finishing the second run. So yeah, it definitely gets me fired up.
Yeah, I think those doubts are something every athlete can kind of relate to. And can you speak of your state of mind when you're at the starting line, knowing that there are probably millions of people watching at that moment?
I'm in the start gate, whether it's in a race or in training, I try and go for a pretty similar mindset, no matter what the circumstances are. Like I said, I kind of focus in on my cues and maybe one sort of phrase or thought that's going to get me fired up into the right mentality, and that's what I direct my attention towards, no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah, and so whilst competing at the World Junior Championships, did you learn anything from the standpoint?
Yeah, I'd say World Juniors kind of taught me to trust my skiing a little bit more, in the sense that I didn't need to try and reach for something that was that I didn't have in my skiing. It kind of just taught me to trust what I was already able to do a little bit more, and just put that forward instead of trying to reach for something that was beyond me.
Yeah, and our last question is, what has been the most important lessons that you've learned as an athlete, starting from high school up until now? Like, really anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd say the most important thing for me, and I think for a lot of athletes, and it's a pretty universal bit of knowledge, is believing in yourself. That's definitely the number one thing. If you can muster the belief in yourself and believe that you can do it and that you will do it, just that alone is going to increase your chances of actually doing it tremendously. It's for sure been huge in my career. And I think pretty much every athlete can agree that believing in yourself is incredibly important and really invaluable to any athlete. And it goes outside of athletics as well. You know, whatever kind of task you're doing, belief in yourself has a tremendous effect on your performance, no matter what you're trying to do.
Definitely, yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you'd like to share, George? Because that's all of our questions, and yeah.
I think that about covers it. You guys hit on just about everything.
All right. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and on skiing. I thought it was really cool, and I hope our audience will appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely.
Enjoyed it.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to the My Design Sports podcast. Before you leave, please show some love for the podcast by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Stay tuned for next month's podcast with a new guest speaker.